Hey guys, what's up? Sai here and welcome back to another video. Today I'm going to talk to you about my big move from Canon over to Sony. So I've shot with Canon cameras for probably 10 or more years now. My first camera was a Canon 1100D, then I moved up to a Canon 60D, a 70D, and then finally made my way up to a full frame body, which was the Canon 5D Mark III, and I'm currently shooting on a Canon 5D Mark II. I know it's a bit meh these days, but I would normally video on the Sony, but because I wanted the Sony in the video, the Canon 5D Mark II is the go-to at the moment. So on the Canon 5D Mark II at the moment is a Sigma 1.4 24mm art lens, and then my go-to lens, as you already probably know, is the 35mm, and on this Canon 5D Mark II I've got the art lens 1.4 as well. I've also got a 85mm Sigma art lens, I've got a Canon 100mm macro and a Canon 135, I think it's 2.8 or 1.8, I'm not quite sure, I can't remember, but that's my wedding photography gear that I normally use, and that leads me on to a little bit why I moved over to the Sony cameras. So a lot of my friends were also shooting Sony already. One of my friends had already moved over from Canon. He had the same setup as me, he had the 5D Mark III, and he moved over to Sony and would just constantly send me these crazy, deep, contrasted, deep, rich images that was super clear, loads of clarity, and insanely sharp. Now, I've got good glass, I know my Sigma art lenses can create a super sharp image, but for some reason these Sony images that he was creating were just ridiculously sharp, and I was so annoyed at the fact that he was creating these crazy good images on Sony. So I was a super Canon fanboy and I'd always big up Canon wherever I had the opportunity. However, I was just getting so beat down with these great images these guys were creating on these Sony cameras. So how I moved across to Sony was the fact that the day before my weddings I always check all my gear, clean my lenses, clean the sensors if I have to, charge all the batteries, check all the lenses are focusing fine, make sure the shutters are fine, all the settings are dialed in back to normal. You know, all that normal stuff you should do before a wedding, because the worst thing you want to happen is something to go wrong and have to say to a bride that, oh, by the way, the wedding that you've been planning for the last 2 years and been paying for probably for the last 2 years, I don't have any images because my camera died or something broke. It's just not good enough, and you can't have that happen to you. So I checked my gear and noticed that the 5D Mark II that I'm filming on right now started to stop accepting memory cards, so who knows, this might not even be recording now. In fact, let's check that. Safe to say we're still recording. Cool. So as I was saying, basically the 5D Mark II that I have as my backup body just stopped accepting the flash cards, and I'm not really sure why. I checked every single card that I had, I updated the firmware as best as I possibly could, and it still wasn't working. So there's something internally inside the body that just wasn't quite right. So I needed a backup camera. So the morning of the wedding, it was a late ceremony, so I didn't need to get there until after midday. I ran down to my local camera shop, big shout out to Castle Cameras, and I purchased a Sony A7Rii with a 24-70 lens. It wasn't the best lens out there, but it was within my budget that I had at the time. I've never actually had a lens that wasn't a prime lens, so I found that a bit weird. So since then I've got the Ziess 35mm 1.4 lens, which is obviously my go-to, which is basically the same equivalent as the 5D Mark II that I normally shoot on, and I've also got a 50mm prime as well. So I have the A7Rii as my Sony body. I wanted to get used to this before I ventured into shooting weddings with this full time, so I've done a couple of pre-wedding shoots and obviously taken this out with me on my daily adventures, and absolutely love what I'm achieving with this. So the videos are great, the stills are great, lots of pros and cons which I'm going to go through in just a minute. So the first thing really is the size and the weight of this. This is heavy as hell and is quite chunky and quite big for what you're getting really with this, whereas this is a lot lighter and quite a lot smaller, so it's great for travel, it's great for using all day, doesn't hurt your arms. Whereas shooting a wedding on this, you'll definitely know about it afterwards. The next day, you're going to feel it. So the Canon, I believe, is about 22.5 megapixels, whereas the Sony is like 44.2. So I've basically doubled my megapixels, and that really does show in my images and in the video that I shoot with this. This doesn't work in low light. It's not that great. The ISO, when you pump it up, the images become really noisy. This works great in low light, and the ISO you can pump up over 1000 and you're still not really going to get a noisy, grainy video or still. So that is a great thing, and I can't wait to the point where I can actually use these in weddings. Once I've got another Sony body, I'll probably try and shoot a whole wedding on Sony. I'm a little bit old-fashioned and I like to use the viewfinder, and the viewfinder on this, it being mirrorless, isn't a legit viewfinder, which blows my mind a little bit. Yeah, I'm just still not used to that fact, and the fact that the viewfinder is not actually on until you look down it, it then flashes on, which is still bizarre and blows my mind. And the fact that when you're changing your settings, you're pumping up your ISO or you're pumping up your f-stop all the way up to like f8 or something like that, you can see the outcome within the viewfinder, which again blows my mind, because in the Canon you change the settings, you take your photo, and you don't really see the outcome of that image until it flashes up on the LCD screen afterwards. Whereas this, in real time, you can see what you're going to shoot, which is, again, blows my mind. I've got a real big pet peeve about people that shoot like this and use the LCD screen rather than the viewfinder. However, one really cool thing about this camera is it does have the flip out, fold out LCD screen, which is really useful for shooting low down images. If you don't want to get dirty or wet or whatever, or you're shooting over water, you can get really low down. That's super helpful. However, again, I'm old school and really like to use the viewfinder. One thing I do need to say, some of the cons on this is the battery life sucks. If you're shooting video all day, you'll need 4, maybe 5 batteries. The battery life while shooting video on these Sony cameras is absolutely terrible, and I'm sure everybody moans about that as well. Also, the menu on these Sony cameras is just ridiculous. Like, it's so hard to find anything in there, so drawn out and long-winded. I'm not a fan of that for sure. I hope Sony like update that and make it a little bit easier, a little bit more cleaner for sure. That would be really helpful. However, I'm super happy with what I'm achieving with this Sony camera so far. If you want to check out some of the images that I've created with this Sony camera, check out my Instagram. You can find it just here. And yeah, go over, drop a comment, drop some likes. That would be really appreciated. So although I've got the 50mm and the 24-70, I haven't really used it since I put the 35 on there. I'm a big fan of 35mm. The perspective it gives you is really nice. You don't get those real warped edges as well that you get with, say, something a little bit wider like a 24. Although you can correct that in Lightroom, it just feels a little bit more natural to me. And this Ziess lens is ridiculously sharp. I love, you can change the f-stop on the lens with this lovely little ring. It's so smooth. You can change it so it clicks as well as you go through the f-stops. That's really nice. The focus is really quick on this as autofocus. I find it really quick. However, I do find changing your focal point really clunky and really slow, whereas the Canon, I find it I could probably do it really quickly without even taking my eye off the viewfinder. I could change my focal point within the image really quickly, and along with a lot of the other settings as well on the Canon, I could probably change really quickly. Again, that's just something that comes over time, and hopefully I get to the point where I can do that with these Sony cameras. Also, one thing that's been a bit hard to get used to is underexposing my images slightly by at least a stop with these Sony cameras. Makes the image so much easier to edit in Lightroom once you pull them in, whereas on the Canon I find myself having to overexpose slightly just to get all the detail and the clarity that I need within the image. So that's been a bit of a shift that I've had to struggle with and get used to, but I feel like I'm getting there, and yeah, I'm loving it. So yeah, as I mentioned, I love the weight of this. It's so much lighter than the Canon. It's easy to take with me when I'm climbing a mountain. It doesn't feel heavy on my Peak Design clip. It doesn't take up much room in my bag. I think all round generally Sony have done a great job with this camera, and again it pains me to say that. I want to get another body, maybe the A7R4, and once I've got a secondary body I'll definitely try and attempt to shoot a wedding on this. Now I feel comfortable with the settings and whatnot, but I do think I'm going to keep my Canon gear for a while. So although I've swapped over to Sony, it's not a straight swap. So let me know what you guys think about me keeping my Canon gear. I don't think the resale value secondhand and used is going to be that great anyway, and the shutter count on that 5D Mark III is probably through the roof after shooting 3 years of weddings on there anyway, so I don't think anybody's going to want it. So I don't think it's worth me trading it in or selling it. I don't think there's going to be much value there, so I may as well just keep it and continue to shoot weddings on there once they kick in after lockdown and see where that goes. However, like I said, next goal is get secondary Sony body and some more glass for sure. Also, another thing that I'm really loving is the Ronin SC gimbal, that I can put this on there because it's a little bit of a lightweight camera. It fits on there no problem. You do have to rebalance it every time you put it on the gimbal because it is slightly heavier than some of the other mirrorless cameras, especially with this big lens on there. But the smooth footage I'm getting out of that is great. And I think apart from the drone, so far everything on YouTube apart from this video has been shot on the Sony. So let me know what you guys think. Let me know what cameras you guys are using, what lenses you guys are using, what lenses you prefer to use. Yeah, that would be great. Also, drop a subscribe and a like if you've enjoyed this video. I highly appreciate that. And yeah, I think that's pretty much it. I've moved to Sony, and I never thought I'd say that. Catch you later.